In 2025, he has changed the battlefield. And so far, he's winning. Begin tonight with George Will, NewsNation senior political contributor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post. Good to see you, sir. Why do Democrats keep falling into the same trap?
You know, when you go to get a physical exam, the doctor will take a little rubber hammer and tap your knee, and your knee will have a spasm. Donald Trump's a little rubber hammer, and the Democrats are a big knee. It's reflexive is what it is. He understands that if you can control the topics of conversation, you win. And he's got the Democrats talking about all the things that on the day after the election said, we're not going to talk about that anymore. He won the election with an ad that said, she's for they, them. We're for you. That was it.
And they are still for they, them.
Exactly.
It is, as you said, reflexive. I think there is an interesting question about where this goes from here. The other part of the Democratic playbook, and we see it playing out opposite us at 7 p.m. on MSNBC, is back to Donald Trump as Hitler. Here's Joy Reid.
It was a question of good conquering evil, which conditioned millions of Germans to celebrate Hitler and turn a blind eye to his brutality. If that sounds vaguely familiar, that's because it is. Similarities to what happened in Germany and what's happening now in America are just undeniable.
The Harris campaign spent $100 million a week for about 15 weeks trying to get the country to believe that Donald Trump was Hitler. And they didn't get positive feedback, let's put it that way, from the electorate.
Did not work out how they thought it would. Okay. We're at this point on a couple of issues, right? Birthright citizenship, which has already been overturned by the courts, or at least adjourned by the courts. Now this, whether or not Donald Trump can impound money and not spend it, that Congress has authorized. Ted Cruz himself, I think you would say an ardent constitutionalist, it used to be until Donald Trump showed up, was on CNBC earlier.
I'm just asking you about the law itself, because there's like an actual law and then what's happening, which is different.
Well,
and I think you
look, Andrew, under a constitution, Congress and the president are designed to struggle back and forth, and so we can pass laws putting constraints on the executive, but it is not new for the executive to press back on Congress, and that back and forth was designed by the framers. That's part of the checks and balances. What's clear under Article 2 is the president, all executive power is vested in the president, and that's what he's exercising.
It is interesting now that Democrats who for so long hated the Supreme Court, especially after Roe, are now relying on it.
It was an act of stupendous short-sightedness on the part of progressives to say that trips that Clarence Thomas took were bad and the flags run up the flagpole by Mrs. Alito were terrible, all in an attempt to discredit and delegitimize the Supreme Court. Now they turn around and say the Supreme Court is all that's standing between us and Mr. Trump. And it's going to be particularly interesting, Leland. The biggest fight is going to be over impoundment. That is, when Congress says you may spend X dollars, does that mean you have to spend X, or that's the maximum, it's a ceiling? There's a good historical argument, and some very clever people in the Trump administration who say that history supports impoundment. Congress will have to stop that if they want to stop it. They'll say, we're not giving you permission to spend X, we're mandating that you spend X. You shall spend X. And that's going to be a fight all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's going to shape whether or not Congress claws back some of the power it has rather fecklessly given away.
All right, and this on spending, I think, as you say, if you determine the field of battle, you decide the topic of conversations. If we are talking about condoms to Gaza or transgender coloring books to Peru, which sound like a joke, but they are not, does it matter whether Donald Trump wins at the Supreme Court versus winning in the court of public opinion?
It just matters that he sets the tone and moves on. For example, you go out on the street and ask the average American, what percentage of the federal budget is foreign aid? You know what they're going to say? The consensus will be 25%. It's actually 1%. It's trivial. But as an issue, it's huge. And here, the president, by pausing the spending and getting the reflexive outrage, has got the Democrats saying, we're not spending enough on foreign aid. The average American says, what?
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.